morning, everyone, and welcome to the Metro Board activities of July 13th, 2023. To start the day off, I'd like to ask our Chief Safety and Readiness Officer, Ms. Teresa Empasado, to please provide our safety contact. Ms. Empasado, good morning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome to Metro headquarters. In the event of an alarm activation, we'll exit this conference room via the glass doors and proceed into the lobby and await further instructions from the security team. If we're instructed to exit the building, we'll go to our designated assembly point at the adjacent Hancock Park, and the security team will coordinate with first responders. There's an AED located at the entry desk. And in the event of an emergency, I'll retrieve the AED and render aid while the security team contacts first responders. Lastly, restrooms are located in the vestibule area adjacent to this room. Biking is a great way to get around the region, and Metro services are bike friendly. Next time you take your bike on the train or the bus to connect between a Metro stop and your destination, be sure to follow these safety tips. When using the rail system, take the elevator down to the platform for your safety and the safety of those around you. Do not put a bicycle on an escalator. Don't ride bicycles in stations, on platforms, or in trains. When the train arrives, wait for everyone else to get off before attempting to board with your bike. While on the train, do your best to avoid blocking aisles and doors. When taking your bicycle on Metro bus, follow the instructions for loading and locking your bicycle on the rack at the front of the bus. And when near or approaching your stop, be sure to remind the bus operator that you're retrieving your bike from the bicycle rack. See a station manager or bus operator with any bike transportation safety concerns. For additional information on transporting your bicycle on the Metro system, visit WMATA.com. This concludes our safety contact.
Thank you, Ms. Empasado. Welcome to the meeting, today's meeting of the Metro Board's Executive Committee. Since this is our first public meeting of the day, I'll ask our Board Corporate Secretary to please call the roll. Ms. Ellison.
Chair Smedberg.
Present.
Vice Chair McAndrew.
Present.
Vice Chair Lowe. Director Klein.
Present.
Director Letourneau.
Present.
Alternate Director Worth. Director Drummer.
Present.
Director Martin Proctor.
Good morning.
Mr. Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Our first order of business is to approve the agenda. If there are no objections, we'll consider the agenda approved. Does anyone on the Executive Committee have any objections or comments on the agenda? Hearing none, the agenda is approved. Now we'll move on to the approval of the minutes. We have two sets of minutes before us today, those of our June 22nd, 2023 meeting and executive session. If there are no objections or comments on those sets of minutes, we'll consider the minutes approved as presented. Does anyone have any comments or recommended changes to those sets of minutes? Hearing and seeing none, the minutes are approved. We have one item on our agenda this morning, an overview on sustainability at Metro, and an update on efforts that are advancing the environmental sustainability objectives of Metro's strategic transformation plan. I'll turn the floor over to Mr. Webster and Ms. Healy for this morning's presentation. Mr. Webster, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee and the board. My name is Tom Webster. I'm Chief Planning and Performance Officer here at Metro. I'm joined by Rachel Healy, our Director of Sustainability. This morning, we will provide a brief overview of sustainability at Metro, review and highlight some accomplishments to date, provide some examples of activities driving delivery on Metro's environmental sustainability objective, and emphasize the importance of Metro in achieving federal and regional policy goals, and the need and really the power of partnership in doing that. Our new strategic transformation plan adopted by the board earlier this year is guiding both long-term strategy and day-to-day decision-making at Metro. Your Metro plan sets our vision to be the region's trusted way to move more people safely and sustainably. All of the elements in this plan work together to make Metro and the region sustainable through achieving benefits like increased economic strength, access to opportunity, decreasing congestion, cleaner air, and mobility. Today's presentation, we're going to focus on environmental sustainability, energy initiatives to drive modernization and efficiency. Metro is inherently sustainable, environmentally sustainable. Beyond moving people, public transit has tremendous health and environmental benefits. Then I'll turn it over to Rachel to continue the presentation.
Thank you. I'm Rachel Healy, the Director of Sustainability at Metro. Good morning, and thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. I wanted to start with a simple fact. Every trip taken with Metro instead of a car reduces the region's carbon footprint. Last year, Metro customers rode 760 million miles on bus and rail. That's the same distance as driving to the moon and back, about 1,600 times. And by using simple math, taking Metro for those many miles instead of driving, you avoided approximately 240,000 metric tons of greenhouse gas tailpipe emissions in 2022 alone. That's why, if you care about our environment, you should take Metro. Metro's doing its part to make it easier to choose Metro bus or rail by improving our service and our fares. And our partners across the region are also making key investments and policy decisions that drive increased ridership. Like Montgomery County's abatement districts, DC's rollout of bus lanes, Prince George's County and the state of Maryland's activation of the Blue Line corridor, and Arlington's Missing Middle initiative, just to name a few. Sustainability is not just a buzzword for Metro. It has been a core value for years, and significant actions and progress have already been made. Much progress has been achieved through incremental investments in our ongoing capital program, where we replace equipment with modern, efficient choices, and updates to our business and operational practices to embed sustainability into everything we do. To drive environmental sustainability, Metro's Strategic Transformation Plan sets 3 primary initiative areas and several targets to measure progress. In the board's adoption of these targets, it has set very aggressive but achievable goals for Metro and for the region. The targets are to increase regional greenhouse gas emission displacement by 10%, use green certifications to ensure that we are designing and maintaining modern, efficient buildings, keep our water use to less than 1 gallon per mile of service, shift to 100% carbon-free electricity by 2033, deliver 100% zero-emission bus by 2042, and zero-emission non-revenue and paratransit fleets by 2050, and finally to achieve net zero carbon operations by 2050. The next few slides will cover examples of ongoing programs that are driving change in each one of these initiative areas. Metro's strategy and actions around energy are important for the region and for the authority. This is because Metro is one of the largest energy users in the region, and energy costs are one of Metro's largest operating expenses after labor. Our service requires 5 trillion BTUs of energy annually, enough to power 26 Empire State Buildings. We've already made substantial progress on energy efficiency and modernization, and will continue to increase efficiency through operations and capital program improvements. We also increased our percentage of carbon-free electricity from 0 to 35% between 2021 and 2023. While transitioning to cleaner energy sources is essential, Metro's decarbonization strategy has and continues to prioritize reducing energy demand by advancing efficiency. Metro is also leveraging its assets to deliver clean energy for the region. Metro's solar carport program utilized an innovative lease structure to provide 10 megawatts of community solar annual revenue to Metro and station improvements for customers. The first 3 locations will be turned on this year, and when operational, the carports will generate enough clean electricity to power over 1,000 homes annually, making it one of the largest community solar projects in the Mid-Atlantic and the nation. Solar is also being planned for several new facilities, including Bladensburg and Northern Bus Garage. The board recently adopted an accelerated goal to deliver 100% zero-emission bus by 2024. And we're very excited that the first battery electric buses are arriving. and also that Metro applied for and was awarded a federal grant for $104 million to electrify the Cinderbed Bus Garage in Virginia. Metro is actively coordinating with its peers nationally and in the region, and we have established a regional subcommittee with stakeholders from Virginia, the District of Columbia, and Maryland, where at the most recent meeting, there was a robust discussion and collaboration around regional zero-emission bus workforce development. Metro is also in the early planning stages for transition of our non-revenue fleet and paratransit vehicle fleets that will be closely coordinated with ongoing fleet planning and calibration efforts. Metro works hard to divert construction waste from landfills. We have used LEED, or the Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design Standard, to drive an 80 to 90% diversion rate for construction on recent projects, as you can see here. Over the past several years, Metro partnered with the Anacostia Watershed Society to plant over 385 trees at 4 Metro rail stations, improving customer experience and providing health and environmental benefits. Metro is actively looking for regional opportunities to increase tree canopy and other green infrastructure investments. Utilizing green certification helps Metro build for the future by adopting energy and cost-saving technologies, supporting innovation, providing healthy workspaces, and being a good neighbor to the community. For example, at Metro's 3 new office buildings, we prioritized energy-saving technologies like advanced lighting controls, modern building envelopes, and state-of-the-art HVAC systems to reduce energy use and costs over the life of the buildings. As a result of those decisions, the building we are in today achieved a perfect score on the Energy Star scale and has 35% lower energy costs and produces 86% less greenhouse gas emissions than a similar modern non-LEED facility. Metro also promotes sustainable innovation and best practice adoption through, firstly, our Sustainability Awards program, where we recognize employees for their leadership in adopting new practices. This past April, we celebrated 34 employees from nearly every department across the agency, and our Sustainability Lab also, where we support innovation through identifying and testing new technologies and practices for agency-wide rollout. We're currently testing battery-powered track maintenance equipment and battery electric leaf blowers. So Metro will continue to commit staff and invest resources to drive sustainability throughout our core business and capital reinvestment program, making our operations more efficient and sustainable. But within that context, don't forget that our biggest impact on the region is through the service that we provide. And that getting more people to take Metro is one of the most effective ways to leverage existing investments and support regional transformation. Metro is in a unique position to support federal and regional policy. Our partners have outlined sustainability, climate, and mobility plans with ambitious goals, including aggressive emissions reductions, significant increases in transportation, and active transportation such as use of buses, trains, biking, and walking, and overall reduction of vehicle miles traveled. Those goals simply cannot be met without Metro. Collaboration and partnership are required for Metro to continue delivering service that supports maximizing the region's return on investment, regional decarbonization, catalyzing investment in electrification, a green economy and green workforce, and climate resilient communities. To deliver, Metro needs predictable funding, really investment, and policies that support a future where transit, walking, and biking make sense for more people. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. and Tom. Well, that's quite a bold statement. Without Metro, we can't meet our regional goals. And when you really think about the scope of the organization and what we do in our envelope, it's true. It's definitely true. So, any questions from committee members first? Ms. Klein, then Mr. McAndrews.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this was a great presentation, and I really take the point that Metro overall is sustainable and helping the region every single day with all of the trips that we're providing, folks who don't have to drive. So that's the overarching context. All of my questions are technical details within the "this is great" comment.
Thank you.
One question: what is the timing of the testing of the technology to capture energy from braking? Because I've heard that discussed for kind of a long time, and so I'm wondering where we are, and is that something that's going to be done or ready to deploy in the near term?
Right. So we successfully completed a battery test several years ago. We have updated the designs to the more current technology, and we have other technologies that are not batteries that we are testing for different applications. But we're in a really good place to start rolling that out as part of our traction power modernization program.
Okay, good. And so it's already encompassed within the sort of planned program?
So elements of it are. This is certainly one where as you know, we have an ongoing state of good repair and modernization program for our traction power and power programs. So this is one where we would overlay this modernization effort with that ongoing program. The level of investment that is required to do this at scale is beyond our current capacity. So we will be looking for opportunities where it makes the most sense, but to do it in this long-term vision sort of way, additional capital investment will be required.
Okay, that's exactly what I was wanting to know. Thank you. In the presentation or in the memo accompanying it, you mentioned that the return to automatic train operations will help with system efficiency and sustainability. Can you just delve into that a little bit to explain how that works? Not how it works technically, but how does it support sustainability?
Well, I think if you think about it, I don't know if any of you drive a Prius or something like that, where how you drive your vehicle affects how much energy you use.
I don't know that.
It is.
You should get a Prius.
Yeah. Some people make a game of it, and they want to be as efficient as possible while they're driving.
Okay.
This allows us to drive more efficiently.
Got you.
I'm using very simple terms here.
I appreciate that. That's what I needed. The last question that I had is, I'm curious about the transition to electric vehicles for the non-revenue fleet. It seemed just sort of from a non-technical perspective that I would have thought that would be able to be done faster than converting the bus fleet. Can you talk about why the goal for that is 2050?
So our fleets have a lot of different types of vehicles. Some of those vehicles are going to be easier to transition because of where the market is and because of the tasks that are done by those vehicles. Some of our vehicles are highly specialized, and it may take a little while for us to get there. There is no solution yet on the market, so we're.
Is that like things that go on the tracks and work in the yards and all this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Got it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. McAndrew.
Well, Director Klein took a couple, but when I look at slide 4, the sustainability highlights, just to commend the team for the good work that you guys are doing, but you show a chart that we started sustainability efforts in 2014. I really think, if we are sincere that transit is the mode of choice for sustainability and climate impacts, as well as many other benefits to the community, you might want to go back to the start of WMATA and start this a little earlier. It's good to see that we started in earnest in 2014 and we're making ground, but I think, let's be be true to ourselves. We've been at this for some time and we'll continue to improve. I think the next one, the following slide, we talk about initiatives and targets, and they're ambitious. The question to you all are these attainable today, and what is required for success? I understand we have a funding challenge on our hands, so that might be the first and foremost biggest challenge ahead of us, but if you could lay out in other terms, that'd be helpful.
Okay, so a lot of this work is going to happen as part of our as part of the way we do business, right? So when we are making those investments sustainably. But you're correct. The most important thing we need to do is fund our operations. Did I answer the question?
Dr. Lowe, then Mr. Drummer.
I'd like to dig in a little bit more on the bullet about carbon-free by 2023, which is, I just noticed that's cute and it rhymes. Like, obviously, we're literally putting up solar panels, but can you tell me a little bit more about how we scale to get to, like, because we do use so much electricity. How's it going to be carbon-free 10 years from now?
So one of the ways that we've incorporated carbon-free electricity into our system is through our purchases, right? We purchase energy, we make contracts. We have partnered with the GSA in order to make some, to both have to bring together an even larger bid when we go out for contract, but also to utilize GSA's resources for contract management, and that helps us get clean energy credits while we are purchasing our energy. So
That's really interesting. I think the IG mentioned something about, like, procuring vehicles through GSA being cheaper too. So, like, obviously this is something we need to be thinking about enterprise-wide. I'm not saying I don't love green electricity. Like, obviously I do, but I also want it to be cheap. Since we are legally mandated to have a balanced budget, since you're talking about negotiating a purchase, the little cartoon cash register sound goes off in my head when I hear that. Can GSA help us get, like, carbon-free electricity that's also, like, really cheap?
they do.
Okay.
Yeah. It's,
And so as we move to acquiring power for our entire enterprise through that mechanism, we can also anticipate financial savings.
we can anticipate that those contracts will be very, very competitive on the open market. Sorry.
That's really cool. Thanks.
Mr. Drummer?
Thank you. Can I direct your attention to slide 8? It's the one on generating renewable energy.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, I should be moving the slide.
Yeah, that was it.
There we go.
Yeah. Thank you. First, let me applaud you on the vision, the commitment, and the action planning. A lot of people talk about renewable energy. It appears that we have a plan that's executable, and thank you for that. I do have one technical question. On this slide, it's very inspiring to hear this. We talk about a 10-megawatt solar carport lease. Is that one project, or is that multiple projects?
So it's 4 sites,
Okay.
but it's one lease. We went out once to the industry and got a third party that we partnered with that is building, operating, and maintaining these carports.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
And this is very impressive because it takes about 5 acres of solar panels to get 1 megawatt. So we're talking a lot of acreage of carports, which is excellent. So thank you. That answered the question. I was wondering if you had found some technology that was better than what we already knew about. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Rachel, I have a question. We had this announcement yesterday where making it easier for people to park at our facilities and everything. What are we doing with third parties or other corporate partners to get charging stations there? This region, is one of the, our region is an area where people are buying electric cars at a fairly high percentage, proportionally speaking. So what are we doing to get charging stations at our parking facilities?
So right now, what we're doing is we've got a opportunity analysis being done to identify ways to move forward to provide our customers with electric vehicle charging, hopefully using a mechanism similar to that which we used for the solar canopies.
Okay.
So that we're going out to the market and seeing what we can leverage from a third
Yeah, because I
party.
think there are a lot of new companies that are trying to encourage this type of.
And it allows us to do it on more than a one-off basis, which will be better for the region.
Yeah. Go ahead, Tracy.
No.
Similar contract where one party
Similar
would
kind of
take care of the
contract, yeah.
four facility. Yeah. So, and to follow up on something Dr. Lowe said, Rachel, just overall, these efforts, I think you mentioned a few times saving money, but what are the general efficiencies? I mean, these could be some pretty sizable dollars as we move into the debate about Metro's financial model and its sustainability into the future.
I'm going to go back to, wait, I'm going the wrong direction. I have it upside down, sorry. There. So we've already invested and are providing $7 million annually in cost avoidance through the efficiency measures that we've done as part of the Energy Action Plan. And we're just going to see those increase over time. At the same time, our energy costs are increasing, so we're reducing our exposure to the risk associated with energy cost inflation. So this is really important in terms of just creating a manageable operating budget as well.
Yeah.
So it's a really
That's
important part of our slice of our budget pie.
Yeah, that's great to hear, because particularly as we go to our funding partners and the jurisdictions, this is part of that narrative of what we're doing. This is part of what we're doing to make WMATA a more efficient, effective organization. So, anyone else? Oh, sorry.
Great presentation. I just had a question about the tree canopy. Is there a plan to expand the tree canopy at additional stations in the district? I'm thinking about, in particular, just like standing at a bus stop. I know there's ADA constraints that you have to take into consideration, but given how hot it is in the summer in DC and having the benefits of the trees.
Yeah, we're actively looking for areas where we can expand the tree canopy. And I think as things get hotter, this is going to be more and more of an issue. So it's a program that we are looking to expand.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Clark.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a quick kind of comment in summary. I really appreciate all the board members' comments because they're all connected together in the overall strategy. And so that's why we really wanted Rachel and Tom to come and talk about this topic. So to your point, Chair, I think it is worth diving at some point, really start building the synergies here around the budgeting aspect. The board member McAndrew brought up as well. So clearly we have savings to date. Our goal is to drive that higher and to reduce long-term energy risk exposure. So things like escalators is a good example that run 20 hours a day. Rachel's team is working with Andy's team to think about how we can reduce every ounce of energy on things like escalators. Regeneration, as board member Klein mentioned, on our trains, but also long-term on electric buses. We also need to really, as an industry, start really thinking about how trains and buses work together on energy management. So a lot of people are, again, think about an electric bus as you just go to Best Buy, you buy a bus. What's so complicated? Have a bus on the street. It's the back of house, if you will. So making the dinner is more complicated than serving the dinner. So not only do we have to work with our partners, like and say Dominion or a Pepco, then our facilities need to have all of the infrastructure. But we also got to think through our overall power network and our power substations. So we're already having some conversations about where we'd have additional power substations or using a power substation, upgrading that so it can handle both bus and rail at maybe a facility that does both or they're close to both. And how do we do redundancy throughout that network as well? So we can't be thinking about bus electrification and rail electrification separately. It's Metro's energy management program holistically. And to Board Member Andrews' point, we need, quite frankly, what I see the biggest risk to all of our sustainability stuff is not just the operating revenue, because that, to Rachel's point, there's nothing more important than people using the service, period. But it's the second part, which is to modernize and bring long-term efficiency. We need predictable capital to actually continue to move our modernization program forward. And I am pretty concerned about that because I know we're heavily talking about operation up for next year's budget, rightfully so. But I think we have to keep hitting the drum hard that capital predictability is the only way to ever get to really good cost efficiency, period. And not just on energy management, on everything we do as an organization. Please.
I don't actually understand the extent to which our energy grid is integrated with the region's energy grid. If we're making these kinds of changes that are improving the distribution and the and resiliency within our grid, does that have any bigger impacts for the region? Asking as someone who lives next to a bus garage.
Yeah, I mean, we can have Mike Haas kind of get a deck circulated so you better understand those things. There is some complication to it. Certainly, it's not a generic topic or an easy topic. But generally speaking, the better our network works, it's better for the region network because it's balanced. Right. At the end of the day, we run an energy in our country that's very spiked demand cycles, and so we are, if not the largest, I think we're the largest energy user in the region, and we're going to actually be increasing that with electrification of our bus fleet. So the better we manage through our electricity use and charge, the better it helps balance the grid for the utilities, and then provide predictable energy management. So once we get the electricity, so our lack of better, we take high power energy, for really making it simple here, like Rachel's terms, and we are knocking that down in different ways to use it safely on our system. So high voltage that's going through big power lines, obviously it has to be brought down to usable levels to plug in your iPhone. That's the lowest level, and our trains and buses are in the middle, for lack of better description. And so we have to, those are our transformers, our power substations, how we manage all of that stuff. So
yeah, I see those facilities everywhere throughout I know that we're doing that. So like, when we modernize those, what are the bigger implications for how electricity is flowing throughout the region?
yeah, so maybe we'll have, as Rachel and Mike put together a little white paper, a few slides that can help that. I know that's been done in the past before because a good example is NVTA. I think is that one. I think Tom, I got that correctly. I'm still, sorry, Mr. Chair, I'm still learning all the. And there's a lot of acronyms, but I think I got it after a year. NVTA is helping with the funding of a few on the Orange Line on the Vienna side, if I recall. And that one is a good example of will be better. You're taking a 30-year-old power substation with old transformers and equipment with brand new stuff, and just how we therefore manage the energy through that. It's equivalent to an iPhone 1 versus an iPhone 14 and how long the battery life changes. I'm trying to give the easiest example. So
yeah, it's pretty interesting though.
It is. At the end of the day, energy is
everything.
Yes, we got to get people in the service, and we need to run it as efficiently as possible. So we'll take that comment and get Rachel and Mike Haas, our SVP of Power, to put a little package together. But thank you, Chair. I just want to make that comment because I think everything keeps going back to the long-range strategic of our funding, and we all have these outcomes, and our region wants these outcomes, and we need the funding to tie together to our regional outcomes.
Rachel, one last question. Operationally, as we transition now to sort of a new way of doing business with the strategic plan, these efforts are obviously very important for a lot of reasons. Where are you when you, outside of your specific programs and projects, where do you come in, or where does someone from your team come in when you're looking at a project or just, company-wide or agency-wide?
Right.
Is it right from the very beginning or halfway? I mean, tell us a little bit about that, because I think that's going to be really important.
It's right from the very beginning.
Okay.
So it's getting them there early in the initial, visioning. What are some of the things that we need to keep in mind? It's in the middle when we're looking at technologies, and it's in the end when we're reporting a lot of the benefits that we've gained from the investments. So it's all along we touch, but definitely there in the beginning during the chartering process.
Well, that's great. I mean, we sat through all those conversations, or Tom did anyway. And so it's good to hear that it's actually being practiced. So, anyone else? Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. All right, that concludes our business for today. We'll stand adjourned and we'll proceed immediately to the Finance and Capital Committee meeting with Mr. Letourneau.
Thank you, Chair Smedberg. I am sorry I'm not in person. Unfortunately, I got sick last night and I did not want to get anybody else sick. So I am remote today, but we are ready to begin our Finance and Capital Committee meeting. Our first order of business is to approve the agenda. If there are no objections, we'll consider the agenda approved as presented. Are there any objections by members of the committee to the agenda? Hearing none, the agenda is approved as presented. Now to the approval of minutes. We have the minutes of our June 22nd meeting before us for approval. Are there any objections to the minutes as presented? Hearing none, we'll consider the minutes approved as presented. We have an action item on today's agenda, along with a pretty significant informational update. First, for our action item, the committee will be asked to take action on the sale of dedicated revenue bonds in support of Metro's capital program. Next, we'll get a status update on the Blue, Orange, Silver capacity and reliability study and advance to the next phase of public outreach. Following this round of public engagement, the board will select a locally preferred alternative for further development. So first, on the second lien, dedicated revenue bonds, series 2023A. Mr. Smedberg, myself, and Mr. Clark were engaged in discussions with credit rating agencies related to the series of these, the sale of these bonds. This is using our capital, our dedicated capital, which is a very secure source. And I'd like to congratulate the team for all their work on this so far. I'll turn the floor over to Metro's CFO, Yetende, and its treasurer to begin.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Yetunde Olumide, Chief Financial Officer and Executive Vice President. I'm joined here by Robert Haas, our treasurer. The purpose of today's meeting is to seek approval of the second lien dedicated capital funding bond resolution, review security of debt and financing, as well as marketing strategies, and authorize the issuance and terms for the second lien dedicated revenue bonds, series 2023A, with approval of the 2023A supplemental second lien bond resolution. The second lien dedicated revenue bonds align with Metro's strategic transformation plan by promoting service excellence and sustainability. Importantly, Metro is the first bond issuer to earn a sustainability climate transition bonds designation in the United States. Metro was surveilled by an independent environmental, social, and governance verifier to evaluate Metro's compliance with the social bond principles established by the International Capital Markets Association. This designation of sustainability climate transition bonds conveys that the use of bond proceeds in furtherance of Metro's transit service uniquely contributes to a positive climate transition and positive social impacts to target populations such as low-income groups, seniors, and disabled persons. The Commonwealth of Virginia, State of Maryland, and the District of Columbia each enacted statutes to allocate a pro rata share of the $500 million of annual dedicated funding to Metro for the purpose of reducing the backlog of state of good repair and capital improvements. These funds are deposited with a trustee and applied to debt service payments on outstanding dedicated revenue bonds in the order of priority such bonds were issued. Any remaining funds thereafter are set aside for debt service is forwarded to Metro for use as pay-go on capital projects. This slide shows the sources and uses of capital budgets, including the debt proceeds of about $797 million. The right side shows the fund sources, or how the fund sources are utilized. The PAR issuance is equal to the amount of the FY24 capital budget that the board authorized to be funded through debt. These terms are aligned with current market conditions and rates for bond issuers with a AA credit rating. The by FY30, the unfunded the projected capital investment needs will reach an estimated $1.1 billion. Capital needs are funded by federal funds, state and local contributions, as well as the dedicated funding and debt. It is estimated that the borrowing capacity of the $500 million capital dedicated revenues will be exhausted by FY29 when the capital big red deficit emerges. The board has authorized a negotiated bond sale method at the recommendation of Metro's financial advisors because the bond issue requires the creation of a new credit, the second lien, from the securitization of the dedicated revenues. In pursuit of a negotiated bond sale, Metro issued an RFP with a resulting underwriter syndicate representing 30% DPE participation in furtherance of Metro's DEI initiatives. Should the board approve the resolutions creating the second lien dedicated capital revenues credit and supplemental resolution authorizing the terms and conditions of the bond sale, the bond documents will be publicly posted to market the bond sale. Metro will conduct investor meetings in early August to answer any questions investors may have. The bond pricing will occur the second week of August, thereabout, with closing on or about the 17th of August. Staff recommendation is for the board to approve the second lien dedicated capital funding bond resolution. This resolution creates the credit for the second lien. Staff further recommends that the board approve the supplemental second lien bond resolution, which authorizes the terms and conditions of the bond sale for the Series 2023A. Mr. Chairman, that concludes our presentation, and we'll take any question the committee has.
Thank you. Just one quick question, just for clarification purposes. Interest rate not to exceed 7%, but that's kind of a worst case scenario, right?
That's correct.
We don't actually expect it to be that high.
No, we don't.
Okay. I will need some assistance because I cannot see if there are other hands.
No hands, Matt.
No hands. Okay. So no discussion on this item.
I would just like to, Mr. Chair, if I could, just real quick.
Absolutely.
I just want to say, as you mentioned earlier, Matt and I were able to participate in those meetings in New York, and I just want to thank Yetunde and her team and everyone who participated in those, the presentation, the way you all answered the questions. I mean, it was very professional, and I've done that in the past, but it had been a while, and it was really nice to see, and you really represented the organization very well. So thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Well, if I can add on then, Mr. Chair and Chair Letourneau on our Finance Committee, I want to, on behalf of the staff, thank both of you. You gave up what ended up being a day and a half of your time to go to New York And talking to the financial advisor after our meetings, they said, you going, having the general manager there as well, I think really made a difference in the confidence of the rating agency. So you gave up your time again to this organization to do that, and I think that should be noted and appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Randy. Okay, well then I will go ahead and move approval of the second lien dedicated revenue bond series 2023A. Can I get a second from a member of the committee?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Klein.
Motion is made and seconded. I'll ask Jennifer to call the roll.
Chair Letourneau?
Aye.
Ms. Worth?
Aye.
Mr. McAndrew?
Aye.
Ms. Klein?
Aye.
Mr. Chair, the motion passes.
Thank you very much. All right, we'll move on to our next item, which is the Blue, Orange, Silver Capacity and Reliability Study. I will note before we begin discussion that Director Klein will be recused from this item and will be stepping away from our dais for the remainder of the Finance Committee meeting. As staff are getting settled here, I'll just note this is a topic that we've had some discussion before that we're kind of rekindling as we go back out for public comment, but I really can't say loudly enough that this is a planning exercise. This is a planning document. It is not an immediate plan. Certainly we will need participation from all of our funding partners before any of these items potentially move forward. But it is responsible for us to be planning into the future and sharing with the region what's possible and what benefits can come from enhancing the system. And that's what this is really all about. So I think I'm turning this over to Mr. Webster.
Yes, Mr. Chair, and thank you, and good morning again. Again, I'm Tom Webster. I'm Chief of Planning and Performance. I will be joined shortly by our Director of Regional Planning, Mark Phillips, who's walking into the room right now. And again, thank you, and as the Chair mentioned, pleased to be here again this morning, resuming our Blue, Orange, Silver Corridor Capacity and Reliability Study public engagement process. So this is kicking off the resumption of the public engagement. This study began back in 2019 to address multiple needs and really opportunities for the Blue, Orange, and Silver Line and the corridors in the region. The study's purpose is to work with our stakeholders and partners and the public to develop several alternatives to address those needs, the opportunities, assess their relative benefits and costs, and to support the selection of a locally preferred alternative. That locally preferred alternative would advance multiple regional goals, as well as your Metro Strategic Transformation Plan. Just highlight that the advancement of this study and this planning effort is a featured primary initiative in our Strategic Transformation Plan, and like other major projects of this scale would advance a number of Metro's goals and objectives. Importantly, this study was designed and structured to align closely with the federal guidance and federal grant requirements in order to position this potential project or selected alternative to compete well for federal funding. To date, we've completed 2 rounds of public engagement in this study, engaged our partners and elected officials. We've identified 6 alternatives to address the needs and opportunities, and have advanced the analysis of benefits and costs. We're now ready for this 3rd round of public engagement to support consideration and selection of a preferred alternative. Important to note here that the process and the selection of a locally preferred alternative selects an option for further development in the project development and planning process, and enters us into those next stages of the federal process. This next slide shows what the federal funding process generally looks like, finishing the study and selecting an alternative is the first step in the process. The next step is the NEPA and additional project development processes. After project development, a project moves to an engineering phase. And importantly, to do that, the Federal Transit Administration typically requires 30% of local funding or regional funding to be committed, and for that process, they also lock in federal participation or the federal dollar amount committed to the project. Depending on the nature of the alternatives and the speed to delivery here, projects can take a long time. These are large-scale efforts, and of course, depending on the size and scope and delivery method and the selected alternatives, that timeline will vary. We're looking to typically here at 10, 20, decades-long project timelines. However, to address the needs and pursue these opportunities, we need to keep the planning process moving to be well positioned for those future opportunities. I'm now going to turn the presentation over to Mark, who will review the development of the alternatives, the status of those alternatives, and our next steps. Mark?
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Tom. And good morning, Board. I'm here to talk provide a little bit more detail about the needs and opportunities that Tom mentioned, and I just want to mention that those are both Metro's needs, as well as an opportunity to help the region advance several of its important goals in terms of equity, sustainability, and economic development. And the 6 alternatives that we have today came out of a lot of public engagement, stakeholder engagement, and data analysis. So one of the first major needs that we're going to discuss is actually capacity. So as the board knows, the Blue, Orange, and Silver lines are the Metro Rail system's primary east-west corridor, but they share the same tunnel and set of tracks between the Roslyn Station and Stadium Armory near the Anacostia River. And that situation, which we call interlining, under our existing technology and systems, means that we can run 26 trains per hour in either direction through that tunnel. That capacity limitation, we don't believe with our current forecast is enough to carry, I should say, under that 26 train per hour limitation, we can't provide the same level of service, the same frequency on all 3 lines if we're providing headways or frequencies better than 7 or 8 minutes. So for example, the last time Metro operated 6-minute service during the peak, back in 2016, we had to divide that 26 trains per hour around like 10 to 11 trains on the Orange and Silver lines and 5 trains per hour every 12 minutes on the Blue line. That type of service pattern, looking at 2040, when we believe we would have to get back to 6-minute service, is not enough to support and serve the level of ridership we believe we'll have with all the growth and development planned around the corridor. Our jurisdictional partners are projecting a lot of growth in the 1 mile area around these 3 lines, 37% more people and 30% more jobs by 2045. In addition to that, because these 3 lines are interlined, it has a lot of implications for our reliability, in that if there's a service disruption on one line, it impacts the other 2. And because the Blue line is actually interlined with the yellow, if the disruption is severe enough, it can impact the green and yellow lines as well. So this is another opportunity to address some of those historic constraints, address some of our biggest needs by improving reliability so that we can kind of make it easier for Metro to move trains around service disruptions, but also to give our customers additional path choices to get where they're going. So, they might have 2 different train options, maybe a rail plus a bus option that they don't have today. It's also an opportunity for us to make transfers work better in our system to make it even more interconnected and integrated than it is today. So for an example, you can see the graphics on the right hand of the slide show a potential opportunity to connect the Farragut stations. Right now, as you know, the Farragut North and the Farragut West stations are completely separate. This is an opportunity for us perhaps to link them with pedestrian tunnels into one big Farragut station. There's also an opportunity in terms of these regional goals to leverage investments like the Union Station redevelopment, which is a huge DC priority, but it also has huge regional implications for making the connections between different transit lines work better there. So this is an opportunity The red line is already there, connected to the VRE and MARC. This is an opportunity to maybe serve it with additional lines and more service. We also, at the high level, so that core between Rosselman Stadium Armory is fundamental to Metro's operational and capacity needs in the future. But we also have an opportunity to help the region to support development, transit-oriented development, all that planning growth that our regional partners are projecting. This map shows you some of those key areas for development over the next 20, 25 years. And we think there's an opportunity not only to double down on the TOD that's already happening, but to better serve those areas with more transit. Similarly, the region has some very ambitious policy goals for equity. Metro has equity as a fundamental driver of the Your Metro Strategic Transformation Plan. This is an opportunity to advance the equitable outcomes for our customers and for the region. Particularly, if you can see on the map, the region, as we know, has a pretty well-known east-west divide, and if you can see there's a lot of need on the east side that isn't served by high-capacity transit. So this is an opportunity to extend high-capacity transit options and better connect people to jobs and other economic opportunities. Finally, we also have, the region has very ambitious goals for sustainability and climate. Sure, a lot of you know about the MWCOG and TPP goals to reduce our emissions below 2005 levels. Transit has got to be a fundamental driver, a fundamental strategy to achieve those goals. Creating a viable alternative to the car, getting people to switch to transit, and helping reduce those emissions. The 6 alternatives, in addition to all those needs and opportunities that we designed the 6 alternatives to meet, we also did a lot of public engagement. We've had 2 rounds to date, letting people know about the study, passing out information, engaging them with an online survey and in person, even letting them draw on maps their own ideas. So through those 2 rounds in 2019 and early 2020, we actually got 275 ideas from the public through in-person workshops as well as an online survey where we got 2,000 responses. And we have since taken that through a screening process and additional analysis to go from 275 ideas to 16 concepts to 6 alternatives. And now, as Tom mentioned, we're ready for this 3rd round to go out to the public, talk to them about the alternatives and that cost-benefit analysis, and seek their feedback on what their preferred option or preferred alternative would be. All that input, the needs, the opportunities, the stakeholder engagement with our community partners, as well as the public engagement, give us these 4 goal statements for what that locally preferred alternative, that preferred option should do. Goal 1 is to provide sufficient capacity to meet our future demand, our future ridership. Goal 2 is to improve our reliability and on-time performance. Goal 3 is hopefully to look at operational flexibility and cost efficiency. And goal 4 is to support those regional goals in sustainability and equity and provide access to opportunity. So taking all of that together, I'll walk through the 6 alternatives that we have today. The first, this slide actually shows you how they compare in terms of scale, costs, and impacts. So the first alternative is something you always do in a rigorous analytical study like this. You look at the impacts of the no build, doing nothing. And that asks, with the existing transportation system, plus all of the transportation projects and improvements that the region is already committed to funding and planning and building, will that actually address your goals and the outcomes that you're looking for? Scaling up in terms of costs and impacts, we have a rail optimization and bus service alternative, formerly known as a lower capital cost alternative, that seeks to meet the 4 goals at a lower cost than building a new rail line. And finally, we do have 4 options for Metro Rail realignments and extensions. As I mentioned, that first one, the no build, is looking at the region's long-range plan. So both Metro CIP, our 10-year capital plan, as well as jurisdictional projects like the Purple Line and the various bus rapid transit routes that the jurisdictions are pursuing, and looking and seeing if those can meet the 4 goals, particularly our own CIP and capital plan. I do want to draw attention on the map to that timetable over on the lower left side. This just shows you that the operating assumption that this study was built on when we looked at all the alternatives and compared them to each other was taking our current rail fleet plan and pivoting off of the recommendation that we would need to get back to 6-minute peak service by 2040. So if you look at the no-build situation on the rail side, we're again doing that service plan that we had in 2016, 10 to 11 trains per hour on orange and silver, and 5 trains per hour on blue. And that's the basis for the comparisons and the cost-benefit analysis. Alternative number 2, as I mentioned, tries to meet the goals, the needs and opportunities without building a new rail line. So this one has a new network of about 60 bus routes, 54 commuter routes, 6 bus rapid transit routes that try to serve the major origin destination points for current riders of the Blue Orange Silver lines and try to provide service that's effective enough and efficient and time competitive enough to draw people from rail to bus so that we can reduce crowding on the rail lines. We're also looking at infrastructure options that can allow us to optimize service at infrastructure at West Falls Church and the D&G Junction near Stadium Armory that can allow us to optimize service and deploy various service patterns based off demand. We'd also look at dynamic scheduling or making the scheduling flex better on like 15-minute increments to better match the ridership that we get, as well as looking for more space in core stations downtown and the inner ring core, as well as on rail cars. This slide shows you some illustrative maps of what that bus network might look like, those 6 BRT lines and the commuter bus routes. I do want to note that we designed this specifically to serve that Blue Orange Silver rail travel demand, but if this was chosen, if this emerged as a preferred alternative, the actual service, the routes and the service levels would pivot off of the existing service at the time, including any recommendations from the Better Bus Network redesign. This alternative as a whole would attract about 16,000 new riders per day. It would meet our, if people switched from rail to bus, it would meet our capacity goals and lower our crowding at the cost of somewhere between $3 and $5 billion. I do want to note, though, that for that level of service on both the commuter and the bus rapid transit routes to function the way it would need to, we would have to rely heavily on the jurisdictions to do bus prioritization and bus BRT treatments on those corridors. Alternative 3 is a realignment of the Blue Line to Greenbelt via a new tunnel that would start at a new Roslyn 2 station with a direct pedestrian connection to the existing Roslyn station, and then travel on a new tunnel through Georgetown, along M Street through downtown to Union Station, and then travel northeast to areas like Ivy City, the Port City area, Hyattsville, and Greenbelt. This would attract approximately 92,000 weekday riders at a cost of about $25 to $30 billion. It would address our capacity and crowding issues. In terms of comparative performance to the other alternatives, this one would perform best at mitigating potential delays on rail and on-time performance. Alternative 4 is another realignment of the Blue Line that has its same core alignment between Roslyn 2 and Union Station, but then would turn south to serve some of our fastest growing development areas, such as the Navy Yard ballpark area, Buzzard Point, St. Elizabeth's, and National Harbor. This alternative, we believe, would attract about 180,000 new weekday riders at a cost of about $30 to $35 billion, and it would perform the best in terms of attracting ridership and revenue, reducing our crowding, equity impacts in terms of expanding high-capacity transit to the most people in equity communities, and also expanding their access to jobs. Oops, sorry, somehow that went much faster than I intended. All right, alternative 5 would build a new tunnel for the Silver Line from West Falls Church all the way through to Greenbelt, completely separating the Silver Line from the other two, the same way the Red Line is independent today. That separation and the fact that we would still have the local tunnel, the existing tunnel, means that we could provide both express and local service on the Silver Line. It would be completely separate, so we would fix a lot of the reliability issues. It would attract about 140,000 weekday riders at a cost of $35 to $40 billion. This one, in terms of comparative performance, maximizes potential train throughput, again, because it's completely separated, no longer interlined. So it future-proofs the system. It does well with job access to areas like Tyson's. It expands, I think, within a reasonable transit commute to about 150,000 more people will be able to access jobs in Tysons. And it does the best at giving current Blue, Orange, Silver riders additional travel path options for their trips. Finally, we have Alternative 6, which is another realignment of the Silver Line from that Roslyn 2 station through downtown DC, but this one would travel east, Ivy City, out Annapolis Road to New Carrollton. We believe this one would attract about 94,000 new riders at the cost of $25 to $30 billion. Again, would meet the 4 goals. All of the rail alternatives would advance the 4 goals. In terms of comparative performance, this one does best at reducing travel time between downtown DC and the New Carrollton area. I mentioned earlier that we have the 6 alternatives, but have also delivered and completed a cost-benefit analysis of the 6 and the no-build, compared to the no-build, across 14 different performance measures that are related to the 4 goals. If you look at the 6 alternatives in terms of benefits, only the positive impacts, the Blue Line in National Harbor performs the best, and the Silver Line Express in Virginia performs second best. If you factor cost into it, scale the benefits by the cost, then that rail optimization and bus service alternative performs best, with the Blue Line to National Harbor performing second best or second highest. And the table below summarizes some of the metrics I mentioned earlier in terms of ridership impacts, revenue impacts, and the annual operating costs. And the color coding to the left just shows in relative terms how well they meet the 4 goals, like how their performance on those 14 performance measures. $30 billion is a high price. It's a big number. But I think it's important to put that in context of what the region, the resources that this region has, and what it's currently planning to do. I hope everyone in the room knows that the DC region is an incredible economic powerhouse. In 2021, our gross regional product, or the market monetary value of all the goods and services that we created, was about $607 billion. If you assume that that will grow at the same average rate the next 20 years that it did the last 20 years, then that's $25 trillion of economic activity by 2045, and that economic activity will generate tax revenue. Currently, the region as a whole, through the long-range plan, is planning to invest about $33 billion in around 890 road miles. It's also investing in a lot of the jurisdictional transit projects. Our operating funds and capital funds are also included in that long-range plan, but taken as a whole, that package still creates a lot more driving, still creates a lot more traffic, a lot of emissions, and a lot of need for parking and car management. A Blue Orange Silver alternative is a big price tag, but it's a type of project, the type of investment that helps move the region closer to the goals that it's set and its policy outcomes that it's aiming for. I also think we believe it's also important to show that, again, because this is a large project, it's a large price tag, that the likelihood of getting a single federal grant of this size is fairly unlikely. So just like the Silver Line, this would probably be developed in phases. And we're only showing the Blue Line to National Harbor alternative because it did perform the best in benefits, but this approach could be used for any of them. So this just shows an illustrative phasing of how you might have phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, or northern segment and southern segment, and they could be delivered or pursued not necessarily in a particular order. They could be timed with other regional investments and transportation projects that our partners are doing. I just think is there anything you want to say about that? Okay. Great. So we're going to wrap up with just a overview of the public engagement that we're starting next Monday. We're going to go out to the public, show these 6 alternatives, show those cost benefits, hopefully in simple, relatable terms. I will try our best to do that, and gather their feedback on which alternative they think they'd prefer to see and why, what about it stokes their interest. We also have a question in there about potential naming, so that we can, in the future, this LPA, as it moves through that long federal process, we can call it something other than a very technical name. This input, this feedback from the public will also be combined with feedback from our stakeholder partners and community partners, and hopefully inform your decision of that locally preferred alternative. And I just think it's important at this point to note that since we are near the end of the study, we are not going to be revisiting the goals, the alternatives, or those cost-benefit analysis with the public. It's all about the 6 alternatives. So in terms of wrapping that engagement up and finalizing the study, we're going to do that public engagement from, like I said, Monday, July 17th to the end of September. And then we'll go back out and engage our stakeholder partners, our community partners that we've engaged throughout this entire process. We'll do briefings to elected officials and organizations like the Transportation Planning Board. And then we'll come back to the board at some point after we've completed all that engagement, have all that feedback and input for you, and support your decision of that locally preferred alternative. And that is the end of the presentation.
Thanks, Mark. I think just to recap here, I think important, our team wants to acknowledge how challenging it is to think about long-term projects like this at the same time we're having discussions about our fiscal challenges. And I think important, Mark covered a lot of the complexity here in the project. The scale of the benefits of potential investments like this are huge, and we're really talking about the future of transit and the future of our region. So we think it's important that we continue these planning efforts while also working on the other high priority activities here with an eye towards the future and recognizing there's a lot of planning estimates involved here. These are not cost estimates based on engineering. These alignments are conceptual and preliminary, so trying to pick out an exact location for a station is not at the stage we're at here. So one step in a large scale, large benefits, large potential costs, but long-term effort to drive towards this opportunity for our region. So thank you. That concludes our presentation.
Okay. Thank you both. I have a few detailed questions, but I will let some others ask first. But I just wanted to ask one high level. Is it possible, or would it be possible, even with the LPA process, to sort of mix and match segments, since we've kind of segmented out most of these scenarios? So mix and match segments to develop an LPA.
Thank you for the question, Chair Letourneau. Yes, actually, we don't want to engage in a level of complexity with the public engagement, but if the board is interested in looking at hybrid recombinations, then we can certainly support that when we come back to you.
All right, I'll let some others ask some questions first. I think Director McAndrew had one.
Yep, thanks, Chair. So, having said on the other side, years ago when this was last discussed, I had to jog my memory on what we were discussing then and what we're discussing now. And so just thinking through, my first question is, how do you perceive our local partners are going to receive this news? It's been a little while, and we've gone through a pandemic since then. New people are in new seats, and we're asking to move pretty efficiently and fast. So I think just in terms of the engagement strategy and the approach, it might not need an answer, but I think it's a worth consideration, and love to hear, that as part of a report back.
Sure. We have throughout, as you know, Director McAndrew, we've engaged multiple stakeholders throughout the entire process, including what we call the, I think it's Business and Community Stakeholders Organization or committee that you were on. So we will be re-engaging them again after the public engagement, because we think it's a good idea to share with them what we hear from the public before we ask them for their feedback on what their preferred alternative would be. I would hope that all of our stakeholder partners would be excited about the study moving forward. It had been paused for some time, and I know it's complex, it's complicated. There's a lot of balancing of competing interests, but overall, I think the general tenor that we always heard was people were happy to see Metro talking about the long term and engaging in this type of exercise, and I believe that they'll be satisfied and happy that we're continuing. Again, within the context that the general manager and Tom mentioned, it's more complicated now, but there's still good reason to move forward.
Definitely. And one other thing, I saw somebody on the infamous Twitter who's semi-respected in this space said, we can spend a lot of money on buses or bus lanes system-wide, And I think I just raised the question to talk about it. I'll give you my take, and then, if you want to give it your refinement, but I think it's important to put it in context, right? We are looking at a capital program to leverage federal dollars, the Capital Investment Grant Program, that at best, maybe the law will change, but we're talking 50% on a $30 billion, $35 billion project. We don't have the similar type of investment stream available, dedicated multi-year investment stream for $30 or $15 billion bus program at the federal level. And while that would be great, and maybe we could advocate for it, that doesn't exist today. And we should advocate for it. Probably would be good and timely. But I just wanted to, that's at least how I thought about a response to that. But I'd love to get the experts to weigh in. I mean, did I get that wrong? Are there opportunities that we're leaving on the table for a system-wide bus program?
I just, if I can, I'm going to make a comment on that, Dr. McAndrew. So one, I think we should be able to chew gum and walk at the same time, right? So, and I'll say that way, we should be able to solve our operating issues and continue to drive great service and think long-term. And on the long-term stuff, or medium to long-term stuff, and this is only as long as we decide to make it, right? So the cost of this, that Mark mentioned there, go down significantly if we all as a region say this is really important. Well, cost escalation is half of the cost here, right? Year after year cost escalation and finance charges. So the less time it takes to build, the less money it takes to build. And that's significant when you get into billions of dollars of projects. So that's important that we keep reminding everyone. But we should also continue to work on our Better Best Network redesign and work with all of our regional partners to move bus lanes. So in the district's moving pretty aggressively. I want to thank the mayor, DDOT leadership, our former board member, Ms. Babers was working heavily on that. There's other partners, whether it's in Virginia, Maryland, doing the same. But even with that, I think one of the things we have to, and I don't think Tom and Mark highlighted this word, but I want to make sure is there's other regional things that I think we should think about our connections to, which is a good example is Union Station. So Union Station is about to go through a multi-billion-dollar redevelopment program. It is arguably the second most important train hub in America. And we need to connect more people in our region to high and medium speed trains throughout the national network and on the East Coast network, let alone what you and Virginia are working through for inter-jurisdictional trains between VRE and MARC. So the red line only provides certain people access to Union Station right now. All those other alternatives would provide, example, someone in Virginia, direct access into Union Station, and having two lines into Union Station I think could be very important for our national economy and network, and that could relieve ultimately FAA pressure on East Coast flight, which actually causes a big problem. So that's one example. Mark mentioned Farragut. Farragut is let's just be clear, you can read how this system is designed in many books. Farragut was a design flaw in the system. Politically, it was not put together correctly. It's very open about what happened there. We have two stations, very inefficient, doesn't allow for transfers. We could rectify that problem, let alone Roslyn to Stadium Armory and the resiliency that we have there and maintenance windows and things of that nature. So I think there's a long way of saying, yes, we should advance our bus program and constantly be moving that forward, but we have some fundamental design challenges, the way the system is laid out, that we should overcome and tie into the regional things like Union Station, which I think is going to create a lot more capacity for other things, including, I know you talk a lot about BWI. More people getting to Union Station means more people have access to BWI as well, which means we have 3 airports highly connected versus 2 and partially connected. And I think that is a long-term regional value as well. So lots of layers to this besides the infrastructure itself. So thanks for bringing that up. Thanks.
Thank you. I believe Dr. Lowe has a question.
I mean, I'm not on the committee, but yes, I have questions. Okay. My question is my first one is about the lower capital cost scenario. Does the cost that we're showing to the public and kind of like tossing around as we talk about this include the cost of the bus priority treatments that you mentioned would be needed for that to be viable?
It's our best estimate of what that would cost. Yeah.
It's obviously just like it's some billions. It's that for the rail too, right? So I just wanted to make sure that we were comparing apples to apples. Okay. I think the bigger question in terms of helping me understand what this means now and in the future, and also for the general public, is like returning to the original question or problem that motivated the study and what the capacity issue is. I think you already did a good job of explaining, like, listen, there's 3 different lines, orange, blue, silver. Do you want to run 6-minute headways on all 3? Because there are the pieces of all those lines that aren't interlined, and the people at those stations are standing there waiting. So that makes sense. Is there also a capacity issue in terms of literally like bodies that need to move through the core of the system on whatever train of whatever color? Like, given the overall decline that we've seen in terms of trips that people want or need to make into the core because of COVID, do we still have a capacity problem from a people perspective, or is it just from a service frequency perspective?
Today, we do not actually have that same crowding and capacity issue. However, again, because of all the development that our partners are projecting around the corridor, we do believe that we will have the same or worse crowding issues that we had, especially like Northern Virginia to DC on these lines by 2040. And it's a little bit complicated of an answer, so I'll apologize for that up front. But in terms of ridership projections, we stayed with what we had currently from pre-pandemic. But as you noticed, when Tom showed the slide that showed the federal process, there's environmental review and there's project development, and then there's the actual federal grant. We were always intending to rerun the ridership numbers when we believe we have enough, at least a handful of years
data
of the new normal settling in. Because anytime you're going to project in the future, as you know, you have to have trend lines, right? So like everything is still so much up in the air, and our ridership is actually rebounding very quickly this year compared to the last 2. So
it's rebounded more than any other transit system in the United States, as a point of order.
It's very exciting. It's fantastic news. So to be honest, we were always intending to rerun the ridership numbers during the project development and environment review activities. The federal government recently actually issued guidance that said any application for federal transportation under the CIG program has to use post-pandemic numbers. So now we have to. When we do the request to enter project development or apply for the federal grant, we'll have to rerun the numbers. So there's an opportunity then also to, look at what we're seeing at that point and reframe.
Okay, I think that it's good to do this sooner rather than later. The big picture is that because of ridership declines related to the pandemic, we actually have like a little bit of almost like a grace period here, in the sense that Orange Crush is not happening right now or whatever. However, the limited available data that we have right now do not suggest that the decline in ridership that we've experienced is permanent. We are seeing increasing ridership right now. Is Orange Crush coming back before 2040? Or are we just not prepared to even guess where that might happen?
So, we don't have the data that would prove out what will happen between now and 2040. I expect, though, with the capacity that we have, we will experience fuller and fuller and fuller trains as we get closer and closer to 2040. And to put it in the context of this scale of investment, to be ready to go beyond 26 trains per hour through the Roslyn to Stadium Armory segment of the system, it's going to take a lot of planning work, project development work, engineering work, and a substantial investment. So waiting until we have that problem and then starting that process would not be good. So whether that happens in 2038 or 2033 or 2027 remains to be seen, certainly. And of course, the nature of travel has changed some. So days of week, weekdays and weekends. But really what we're talking about here is when the most people are traveling, our capacity to carry people through the core and the frequency on the branches outside of the core.
So even though we've seen a dramatic decline in peak of peak travel, we still do have peaks.
Yes.
They're not valleys. And it's going to create capacity issues. I think that we should start to wrap our heads around the numbers on this a little bit, even roughly. I'm not saying I need to hear by 2035, this many people are going to be in Orange Line cars. But I've started to look at a little bit of post-pandemic travel data myself in my day job research. And I think there are really basic facts about demand for mobility in the region that people need to know in order to understand why WMATA is talking about this. For example, the fact that people in our region are making 10% more trips in 2022 than they were in just 2019. That's a double-digit increase in traffic. And that happened in just 3 years. And there is no reason to think that that's going to slow down. There's a lot of reason to think that this is not even about the 37% more people, right? Once you add them in, that was during a time in which the population of our region actually declined. The demand for mobility still went up. So unless we want to die in traffic, we have to come up with a different plan for how we're going to get around. Because the one thing we do know for sure is that we want to get around.
Okay. I think I'll go. Is anybody besides Chair Svenberg? Okay. Paul, you want to go ahead?
Yep. Thank you, Matt. Mark, a question for you. In prior presentations and what the general manager just said about Union Station, all of these have Union Station as part of their component, the rail, the four alternatives that you highlighted there on the slide. Given what's happening at Union Station right now, are there any opportunities for us to, say, participate in grant programs or funding or make station improvements part of that larger project? Are there opportunities for us with that?
It's an interesting question. Apologies for that. We are actually, we've been invited to comment on the EIS for the Union Station expansion, and the accommodating a potential alternative, or at least not foreclosing on one, is one of the comments that we have suggested to the team and that they've taken us up on. So they're actually thinking about these alternatives and where the stations might be located in terms of their design and moving forward on that redevelopment. I do think, Tom might have mentioned it, there is a fantastic opportunity for any of these alternatives to partner with or leverage grants and other investment opportunities our regional partners are making. Once the board selects an LPA, we can know where the general station locations are, the general alignments, and if they're willing, we can certainly partner with them to kind of combine resources.
And as it relates specifically to addressing the issues along from Roslyn to Union Station, and particularly at the Union Station level, the four that you highlighted there, what weight did Union Station have on that scale of preferences, like, say, the two that got the green dots and the others that got the yellow dots? Did it weigh heavily? Was it an equal factor in terms of coming up with a preference, or ones that are more desirable on the scale, or did it change depending on where the line was going?
In terms of originally formulating the alternatives, it was a primary consideration because we knew the redevelopment was happening, and we were very interested in the idea of creating that connectivity and those transfers to regional services and making more connections to even within Metro, right, to the Red Line, having that type of transfer opportunity as well. In terms of the cost benefit analysis and those outcomes with the regional goals, it did have an impact, a pretty strong impact on transfer times and trip times. So it helped with reliability as well. And our capacity, because one of crowding and connectivity within transfer stations was one of the performance measures.
Yeah, I think in general, thank you, Mark. In general, just to emphasize a point here, connecting two transfer opportunities creates these synergies in the value of the investment. So at this scale of investment, connecting to the places where there are already transit and transportation options is really critical to make it work well. So in the fall and during the budget development process, we talked a lot about the value of frequency at our existing transfer stations and how that can reduce overall travel time and connect people to more opportunities. So in designing this, we've built that in to the screening and to the alternatives and then to the performance evaluation of the options.
Okay. And Mark, you have an initial finding there of, the two preferred alternatives with green dots versus the yellow dots. Talk to us about the cost versus operational projection for the future. How does that factor into your initial findings? Like the construction costs versus future operational costs, or does it?
I apologize, sir. I'm not really sure I understand the question.
No, is there any part of your formula? Does cost of construction and future operating costs, does that play a factor or any role in your evaluation?
I see. It does if you look at the graphic on top, we have the benefits line and the cost effectiveness line. So we did factor in both the operating and maintenance costs as well as the capital costs in determining the cost effectiveness score. So that's why that rail optimization and bus service emerged highest when you look at it that way. So it's basically the total benefits divided by costs.
Okay. All right. Sorry, I'm a liberal arts grad.
Mr. Chair, I think I just had this comment on the operating costs. So these are just rough order of magnitudes based on some of our current miles of operation and stuff like that. So just to be clear, and I want this to be really clear publicly, if we decide to build a new rail line, we are going to build an advanced technology rail line, platform screen doors, automated rail line like you would see in Asia, Europe. We wouldn't be building the exact, while it has to look and feel the same to interoperability with our trains, you wouldn't build a new station in 2035 that didn't have all the advanced technology and rail systems that is best practice around the world. So those operating dollars would actually change if you use your capital right on modern infrastructure. Eventually your cost per trip and per passenger per unit eventually go down. That's why people build so sophisticated lines with things like platform screen door and higher level of automation and things of that nature. So that's where you get into when the NEPA process gets going, then there'll be a whole benefit cost analysis and really getting into the pure operating. So I want to highlight that. To your other point in connection to Union Station, I think this is really important too, that we keep, in some ways I feel bad for our partners because our partners don't know how to plan their investments without knowing what Metro's plans are as well. So this is the first time in the history of Metro that there's been nothing planning or under construction since we opened the doors. There's literally nothing. And so if you're Fairfax building a Route 1 BRT that's going to end up connecting to our station, how is that going to connect to potentially something like this? Charles County is thinking about a light rail line to connect to the Green Line. That Green Line then obviously would connect to not only our current obviously service, but potentially one of these options. Same thing with Purple Line and those kinds of things. So part of why we want to advance this process is get to something of an LPA is so then we can provide our partners predictability. So everything from COG to all of the states, to the district, to the locals can start doing more comprehensive regional planning so we all know what everyone wants to do and we have a real 2050 regional plan versus like siloed pieces. And I think that is going to be really important as our goal is to get more people on transit, even if it's not Metro, getting on people on all of our local bus or MARC or VRE or whatever. The more certainty we can get to development plans, it's going to really help our jurisdictional partners. Maybe saying the obvious, I just wanted to highlight it for our jurisdictional partners.
Yeah, I'm just looking because Mark, if someone's looking at this, the cost of the National Harbor alternative and the Silverline Express in Virginia, proportionally speaking, have pretty high future operating costs and potentially even higher than that. So I just wanted to get an understanding of that. So,
Okay, let me just ask a couple of questions. So is it safe to assume, and should the conclusion that it's drawn from really the very existence of this study be that we, Metro, think that our biggest single need at this point is to enhance the downtown core, and potentially fix the capacity constraints at the Potomac?
I think in terms of long-term capacity and expansion needs, yes. There are, of course, many interim state of good repair and modernization investments that are high priority along the way.
Yeah, well, the reason I ask that is, we have folks who want to add to the system, all the time. And there are, in some cases, even, legislation requiring studies to extend Metro to Prince William County or, other enhancements. And, I wondered if this study can kind of sort of put a marker in the ground as far as Metro is concerned and say, look, we're not doing any of that kind of capacity increases until we deal with the core issue that we have, downtown, essentially. Does that seem reasonable? That might be more of a Randy question.
I don't know if I'll say something, Tom, you jump in. So one, Chair, I'll be careful how I say this, I guess, but I think we should just be honest and say we should not be doing more extensions further in the Metro network until we resolve fundamental design, be careful to say flaws, but design limitations and build more resiliency in the network. So if we want to make the red and the orange or something else go further at some point, maybe that's a great regional goal, but adding more to something that has no resiliency built into it would not be strategically in the interest of Metro or the region. So I would say, one, the priority is, as you laid out, getting this core right on basically east-west and getting some resiliency. It's very similar to what Toronto just went through. They have what they call now a downtown relief line. They built their whole network around one line, grew population by double, and then didn't do anything for 25 years. And so now they're scrambling to fix that. It's very similar, and we want to get ahead of it a little bit. The second thing I think that the team would like to work on before we extend further as well is modernizing our infrastructure. Again, back to things like platform screen doors, higher level of automation, high cost of use of better cost efficiency to run our trains, much safer, very more European, Asian model. Then you would extend further out. So again, getting this place to be more cost efficient. And by the way, when I say that, it's not about labor per se, it's about the whole way we run the operation, safer and more resilient, and then continue to extend from there would actually be the better long-term regional plan. Tom, I don't know if you have a different way of saying it or any other comments on that.
Well, you said kind of what I was hoping you would say, Randy.
Okay.
So that was good.
Okay.
Well, I just think we need to be clear about this because it keeps coming up and there's a lot of discussion and a lot of external discussion about it. And I don't know that as an organization we've really ever come out and said it. And I think you just did.
Okay. I think the other thing we should do.
I was trying to sort of elicit that.
Okay. The other thing we should do, Chair, is we should really be coordinating more with our two partners, especially MARC and VRE. So local bus, we are doing that at Better Bus, but MARC and VRE are both fantastic systems. And I think both states have goals to run a lot more service on their infrastructure and then eventually through trains. The more that happens, the more the regional network works well. So getting people on the service doesn't have to be Metro only. And I think the more we can get everyone on the same page that way will be helpful as well. So the better we all coordinate with the network, I think is what we're after.
Okay. Two other quick things. Is it possible that there is anything that comes out of this that could be a shorter term improvement that does not require, the billions of dollars of capital investment? For instance, and I'm just throwing stuff out here, potentially adding pocket tracks in certain places, or things like better turnarounds. I don't know, any of those kind of things that could be implemented lower cost and much more quickly, but is something that comes out of an engineering analysis or work that is done on one of these, whatever is selected as the LPA.
Let me add another one to that hypothetical mix of a blue line turnback at Roslyn, extending across to Prince George's and the Woodrow Wilson Bridge, solving our interlining challenge. It doesn't solve the long-term challenges that we face as well, but it's an opportunity.
Yeah, I don't know about reducing capacity under the Potomac, though.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I guess my response for the staff, and then Tom, you dig in if you want to add into this, would be all these things need to be thought of and looked at. We've had a lot of conversations that the one Director McAndrew just brought up. We've certainly had conversations, and obviously that's happened here for years. Foggy Bottom is one of our busiest stations, serves arguably one of the most important medical centers in the region, and a big employment center and a big university. With that said, maybe that is worth doing a short-term piece, and then finally solving Roslyn as a super station. And so, but I think what we want to do this is concurrently in the LPA process. So a good example is get the LPA done, then you start the NEPA process, and then if a phasing approach is adopted, to Board Member McAndrew's point, I'm not saying that is the logical first phase, but hypothetically, that could be the first phase, which is National Harbor to Huntington connection, and then the Roslyn Superstation. And then all of a sudden, that is the first phase that's funded, while the second phase is certainly much more complicated, tunneling across the river, across heart of DC to Union Station. But I would argue we need to really make sure we're doing this again with Union Station redevelopment. Whatever happens with Woodrow Wilson Bridge, which is, it's our understanding, I've asked a million times, it's designed to handle rail traffic across the bridge. But from a state point of view, there's two states that care about other types of vehicles going across that bridge, and we should be coordinated on that as well. So all of this is why we're here today, moving this conversation forward, because it's big and complex. But I think you're asking all the right questions in the sense of we should be looking at this as some type of phased approach, because there is no mega project that we're going to build whenever alternative is selected by the board ultimately at once. So phasing and thinking of that benefit cost analysis, I think, is going to be really crucial.
And that kind of leads me to the last question, which is, once we get to the LPA, sort of what happens from that point? Are we seeking funding to do engineering analysis? Are we going to sort of try to decide or engage with the region on which segments of the LPA we want to see first? Like, what do we actually do once we pick an LPA?
I think that question would have a tiered or layered approach of internally, where we have a capital request to put in the budget money for environmental review and some project development designed to get us through environmental review. The larger question of the phasing and which one might go first, or like an interim strategy, is a conversation we can have with the board when we come back to you to select the LPA, and as well when we start the environmental review process. That might be a more a higher level political conversation as opposed to the technical work of the environmental review and project development, but that can all happen at the same time. But we do have a capital request in the budget for some design and environmental review over the next several years.
Okay. All right. Any other comments, questions on this item? If not, then with no further business to come before the committee, we will stand adjourned. And I'll turn the floor over to Chair Smedberg, who has a request for the board to convene in executive session.
In accordance with the bylaws, I, Paul Smedberg, request that the Board of Directors convene an executive session to discuss the following matters pursuant to Article 2, Paragraph 9, subsections B, litigation, investigations, and other legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice or consultation with counsel and staff members, And C, personnel or labor issues, including discussions of labor contracts and labor negotiations, consideration or interviews of candidates for employment, and the assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, or resignation of individuals. And D, contractual or other matters involving confidential or proprietary concerns or the investment of public funds where discussion in public would adversely affect the financial interest of WMATA. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
The ayes have it. Thank you. Thank you for joining us this morning.